Today I am going to be interviewing Megan. Megan is a mama of three who's going to share a little bit of her story with us. Megan, would you like to give a brief introduction?
I am 28 years old. I live here in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm married. We've been married for almost 6 years, and we've got three kiddos. My oldest is my stepson. He's 9. He lives with us full time. And then I have two little ones, Adeline, who's 5, who is the birth that I was going to talk about today, and then Maverick, who is 10 months old. And I'm a stay-at-home mom full time. My husband works for the railroad, so he is gone often.
I
So
actually
it's
understand that life very well. My husband also works for the railroad, so
that is my life. My life, you get that very much. And Adeline actually has a seizure disorder, so a lot of my time is spent also trying to pinpoint exactly what her seizure disorder is because we haven't quite figured that out yet. And then having full custody of my bonus kid, he is so wonderful and he's made so many strides since we got full custody of him. He's just blown us away, but he does have a lot of developmental delays, and that's a whole nother ball game in itself, that I'm having to learn. And again, going back to the topic, what I went through with Adeline and her birth has helped me learn how to advocate for myself and for my children so much that the skills that I learned from that situation, just I watch them continue to grow and continue to get to use them now.
that's wonderful. I love that we go through these really difficult moments, but still can find the light in it and still pull through out of it. And then to utilize those skills that we learn in such a hard place to, improve our lives and the lives of those around us. I think that's a very amazing skill set that we as moms tend to be able to hone very well.
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit about what your like birth plan versus the reality of what actually happened?
Absolutely. So with Adeline, she was my first. I was 22 years old. I was bright eyed and bushy tailed, and I thought that everything I wanted was going to happen. I wanted, immediate skin to skin. I wanted, dim lighting. I wanted her in the room because I had done research and I wanted all testing to be done in the room. I never wanted her to leave my sight because also in my head, I've watched Lifetime and I was like, what if my baby
Mhm.
gets switched? So I just had this full out plan of all of these wonderful things that we were going to do. We were going to do immediate straight to the breast. We weren't going to do any formula, no bottles, no pacifier, no bath. Like,
Mhm.
I just wanted to be fully immersed in those golden hours right after birth. And so I made my plan. I got like a little template online and I filled in what I wanted and I made multiple copies and I even laminated them in case things got messy. And not one thing happened the way that I wanted it to. And I am very much a type A person. And when I have a plan, that's what's going to happen. And I do have a hard time adjusting to things not going my way. And then, so the things that actually ended up happening was I had my water broken, which in there was not really a medical necessity for it. I was not educated on the possible risk factors or basically, yeah, the risk factors, what could go wrong, or necessarily why it might not have been a good idea to induce with no necessity. And I was just excited. I wanted to meet my baby. So I was like, yeah, I was having contractions. Like, let's just do it. Well, it was shortly after that that I spiked a fever, and nobody knew why. Nobody was saying anything to me about it, and I was so groggy and in and out of it, and it was all very much a blur to me. And one of the worst things out of the situation was the way that I felt that the medical staff treated me. during my stay there. I felt very much like a child, like there was no respect for me and my choices and my voice and whatnot while I was there. One of the nurses, I had asked her a question and she was like, "Oh, what, you didn't research that when you made your laminated birth plan?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm just gonna shut up then." Like I look back and I'm like, why didn't I fight more? Why didn't I vocalize that her saying that to me wasn't okay? But I had like 102 fever. 100, I mean, I think my fever got up to almost 104 at one point. So I was so just out of it. And my mom and my husband were there with me. Neither of them were informed on anything that was going on. When finally it came time to push, I was pushing for 2 hours and my contractions stopped. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what is going on right now? And I just remember looking at my mom and being like, I'm gonna keep pushing because I really didn't want to have a C-section. Like, I was terrified to have a C-section because in my head, like, how am I gonna recover from a C-section and take care of a newborn baby? Moms do it all the time. Hats off to y'all because I cannot even imagine. But so had her, immediately placed her on my chest, which is what I asked for. So I guess something did go according to plan. But it was right after that they took her from me, and I was actually talking to my mom a little bit about everything that happened last night. And what I realized is that in that moment, I was feeling the rush of emotions for having a baby, and I was sick and there was so much going on that maybe what the nurse said to me wasn't exactly what I heard, but what I heard was that you have an infection. Your baby passed through your birth canal, which meant that she now has the infection. Her brain is going to swell. We are taking her down to Rady's Children's NICU. We were living in San Diego at the time, which was quite a ways away. I mean, it wasn't just, next door. There
Mhm.
was there was no NICU in the hospital that I delivered at. And so I mean, I just go into full panic mode, like, you're not taking my baby. Like, if you're taking my baby, you're taking me. Like, I'm going with her. This is not an option. And I'm trying to get out of bed and everybody's like, "No, you got to sit. Like, you cannot get up right now. You're in critical condition due to your fever and this infection." And I'm still like, "Well, why do I have an infection? Why do I have a fever? What is going on?" And nobody can give me an answer. And then finally, my husband, I just remember looking at him during all of this, and his son, his birth was incredibly traumatic for my husband. And so I'm just like thinking, oh my gosh, here we go again. Like, like that. Why was that my first one of the thoughts in my head? I don't know. Mother, wife, nurturer. That's, you think about those kinds
Mhm.
of things. But finally, he snapped out of it and he came over to me and he was like, "You are no good to us dead. Sit down. Like, sit down. Take the medicine that they're saying. I'm going to go down there with her." So, he went down there with her. And as soon as they wheeled her out, I stood up out of bed. And I mean, it was a mess, obviously. If you've ever given birth, you know what that's like. And it was just a mess. And I mean, in my head, I was like, I've got to take a shower. I've got to get dressed. Like, I have to break this fever. So the nurse was like freaking out, yelling at me because I'm walking. And I'm like, I don't care. You're not going to stop me at this point. You've already taken my baby. I am going to break this fever so that I can go down there. The deal that my mom ended up working out with the doctor was that if my fever broke, I could leave, within X amount of hours, just making sure that, I think it was 8 hours, was to make sure that the antibiotics fully got in my system and that my fever broke and it wasn't going to come back. And I agreed to it, but I told him, I said, if this isn't done and I'm not out the door in like 10 hours, I will leave against, medical advice. I don't care. He's like, "Well, your insurance won't pay." I'm like, "I don't care. My baby's not here.
Mhm.
Like, I don't care." And so then it was after that too that I remember asking, why didn't you tell me that having her vaginally would have increased the risk for her to contract whatever infection it was that I had, because they specifically said because she passed through the birth canal, she got the infection or was possibly going to get the infection. In my head, she had it. And they just said, they were like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if I would have been presented with this information and been given all of the facts, wouldn't I have, couldn't I have chosen a C-section to avoid this whole thing?
Mhm.
And they were like, well, that really wasn't an option. And I'm like, why wasn't it an option? Why wasn't I given that option? This is my birth, my baby, my body.
Mhm.
And they were like, well, it just wasn't a good option at the time. And at this point, obviously, I'm exhausted. Like, and I cried. I ended up crying myself to sleep. My husband FaceTimed me, and you know, I specifically said to them, I was like, when you take her down there, please give her breast milk. I want to breastfeed her. Please give her breast milk. They gave her like 3 ounces of formula, a newborn baby. I
Mhm.
was just like twitching, but you think they'd know better in a NICU, right? Like, you think they would. But so, my husband got to change her first diaper, and he got to feed her and hold her all night. And I'm so thankful that he was there and she wasn't just alone, but it wrecked me, and it continued to wreck me for a very long time. And ultimately, what I ended up finding out through my OB, who was not the one to deliver, she wasn't on call when I was there, which is, of course, they had just built a new hospital that my OB was affiliated with. And the labor and delivery unit wasn't open yet because the NICU wasn't ready yet. Well, right before I had my daughter, the hospital, the older one that, we were set to deliver in, had a gas leak on the labor and delivery floor. So in an emergent status, they had to move everybody over to the new hospital, but they didn't notify anybody that the NICU wasn't ready. And I didn't think to ask, because why why would you think, as a first time mom, if you haven't been through or known somebody to go through something where their child needed a NICU, why would you think to ask, is the NICU ready for my child? And what happened was, not all of my file got sent to the new hospital. How that happens electronically, beyond me. I had tested positive for group B strep, and I didn't know. I
Okay.
didn't even know that I was tested for it. And I don't know why I didn't think about it, because I read about it in the book, but I didn't, in hindsight, obviously, I should have been more educated to the tests that were being performed in the situation that was going on. But I also feel like my doctor had an obligation to inform me.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so my records didn't come over, and that's what ended up happening, is that I was group B strep positive, and so that's why I had the infection, I had the fever, and all of that. They didn't start the antibiotics right when I got there, so that's what that all ended up as. And my daughter, totally fine, no brain swelling. After being there, they were like, she might be jaundice, and I was like, she might not be. We live in San Diego. I'll put her in a window. Like, we're going home. And my husband was like, you should file a report. Like, this is not okay that this happened. This didn't happen just because it's how it happened. This happened because somebody didn't send a file over. He was like, thank God everything was okay with our situation, but who's to say it would be okay with somebody else's? And it actually wasn't. There was a set of twins that was delivered prematurely in that hospital, and they didn't make it down to the children's hospital in time to the NICU.
That's heartbreaking.
It is absolutely devastating. And I was just like, you know what? They should be notifying mothers before they're coming into this hospital. We do not have a NICU ready. We do not.
I would assume
And
there are other hospitals in the area that you could have chosen to go to, right? It's not like that was the only option.
it was not. No, there was, I mean, there's a plethora of hospitals. You're in a giant city that had, you know, really high level NICUs that we any mom could have chosen to go to for, for any reason. And they could have just been, I'm more comfortable with delivering at this hospital because there's a
Mhm.
NICU, even if their provider didn't deliver there. I
Yeah.
mean, there was no lack of options. There was just a lack of information.
Yeah. That's mm. Unfortunately, we do tend to live in a society where informed consent isn't always an option because the knowledge, the informed part is definitely a common missing link. But I'm glad that your daughter was okay and you were okay, and that you've been able to take this and shape it into something somewhat positive to help. I know you mentioned earlier that you like to help other moms by talking to them and letting them know your story to help improve their outcomes and whatnot. Um, was there anything that anybody said or did in the midst of everything I know you'd mentioned a couple of things that were not very helpful that the nurses said and whatnot, but was there anything that you seem looking back was like definitely something that helped you get through the situation?
Absolutely not. There was not one thing that anybody around me did or said or offered that was helpful. Um, no, no doctor, no nurse. I mean, aside from my husband being like, "You're no good to us, dead. Get better." That I was so in it. I was so in the feelings, and nobody around me, even when I got down to the NICU with her, nobody was like, "She's doing great. You don't need to worry." No, I was met with, "We don't have a pump for you." So that I had to try and like have my mom buy one and bring it to me. And then I was what also they didn't want me to hold her. They told me I was spoiling her. They were like, "You need to put her down." And I was like, "Ma'am, excuse me, you do your job and watch the monitors, and I'm gonna do my job as her mother and take care of her." So it was just like constant negativity from everybody around me, not saying my family, but the providers around me wanting to argue about everything. I can't tell you how many times they told me to put her down. It got to the point where I stopped going to the bathroom because every time I came back, she was screaming bloody murder and no one was around. Like I just would sneak snacks in, and like I stopped going to the cafeteria, I stopped going to the bathroom. And I mean, this is the mom's postpartum thing. So I was bleeding through my pants because I refused to leave her side because I had no faith in the people that were there to take care of her. It was finally when my mom was like, "I'm going to come up there and I'm going to sit with her and you're going to go home. You're going to take a shower. You're going to eat real food and you're going to take a nap." It took my mom coming in and being like, "Go," for me to relinquish some of that. But I had felt like I lost so much control during my labor and delivery that I had to have all of the control in the NICU, and everybody around me telling me to go against my natural instincts as a mother just made everything so much worse.
I
So it was
understand that.
unfortunate, but no, there was nothing that anybody said to me. Um, and to be completely honest with you, it took what, about 3 months for me to even figure out exactly what happened
Wow.
during my labor and delivery. So I don't even know that there was really anything anybody could have said during those times that would have made a very big difference.
That's true. Um, do you feel like the negative um, uh, interactions you had with the staff and stuff, do you feel like that played a role in your postpartum, like later on down the road?
Yes, I do. Because I felt like it made me like second guess myself because while I at that moment I was like, "No, this is what I'm doing. This is how it's happening." Still in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Well, if these medical professionals are telling me that I shouldn't be holding her this much, should I not be holding her this much? If they were telling me I needed to give her this much formula, should I really be giving her this much formula?" And then they were telling me, they were like, "Well, she's just not going to latch. She's just not going to do it." No matter how many times I asked for a lactation consultant to come in and help me. It ultimately was me going on YouTube and rigging a tube into a nipple shield with a syringe to get her to like she's like to push the breast milk
Mhm.
through so that she would be like, oh, there's something coming.
Yeah.
It definitely did, because it completely affected my breastfeeding journey with her. And that in itself, I hadn't even bought a bottle because I in my head we were going to nurse and that was it. And so that definitely impacted my postpartum depression. To this day, she is 5 years old and I still have the most guilt for not breastfeeding her. I exclusively pumped for her for about 8 months, but then after that, my supply doesn't do well with pumping. I don't respond well to a pump, and I had to go back to work. So, and that's a whole different conversation, having to pump in a storage
Yeah.
closet.
Yes, that is a different conversation, but it is a needed one, which we will have later on down the road. So I will make sure that we get back in touch for that one. Um, so did you find anything helpful, rather it be, something, a conversation, listening to something? Was there anything that you found helpful with coping with the trauma of your birth, as things progress and later on down the road to help you you can never get over that kind of thing, but to help you kind of come to terms with it and cope with it and move forward?
It wasn't a specific person, it was just time and myself. It took about a year for me to be able to talk about what happened without breaking down into tears. And so once I was able to like actually talk about it, I was able to pinpoint where my feelings were and what parts of the situation I was upset with. And once I was able to be like, okay, well, I'm upset because I wasn't informed. I'm upset because they didn't let me make a choice for me, my body, and my daughter. I'm upset because of the way I was treated, as opposed to just not being able to just being like, I'm just upset. I'm just upset. I'm just upset. And not being able to pick apart the things that were upsetting me. Because once I was able to pick apart the things that were an issue, I was able to be like, okay, here's what happened. Here's how we're going to deal with it. Here's how we can move on and learn from it. And it was at that point, when I did work with myself, really, that I got to that. And I should have started therapy way before that point, but and I started therapy shortly after. She was about 2 when I started going to therapy, and I realized the coping skills that I learned were actually really great in being able to break those things down. Um, my husband didn't really understand why I was still so emotional about it. He was like, everything's fine. Like,
Mm.
she's okay. You're okay. And I'm like, I am not okay. I am not okay. This was trauma. This is trauma. And it resulted in postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. I just going to work. I only was working 2 days a week. Just going to work, I would have nervous breakdowns at work because I wasn't with her. I would make my husband bring her to me because I could not let her out of my sight. I became like obsessive with her. I wanted, you know, traditionally speaking, when I have heard about postpartum depression or baby blues, as people put it, and I don't like that term. Um, I
They're
cannot
very
stand
different
that term.
things.
Yes. You know, from what I have heard about it in my life is very much like a suicidal thing,
Mhm.
or not wanting your baby, not connecting with your baby. And I know that that does happen, but that's not what it was for me. So I didn't immediately recognize that that is what it was. And I wasn't necessarily well educated on postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And nobody really asked me. nobody really checked in on me when it came to that kind of thing. Not even at my postpartum checkup. They were like, well, it seems like you're experiencing a little bit of depression and anxiety. Here's some Zoloft.
Mm.
I was like, oh, okay, thanks. You know, like and when you're in it, sometimes you're so in it. I couldn't move. I couldn't make moves. I couldn't make moves to make phone calls, to do research. It was just like, okay, this
Yeah.
is what it is. I wanted to take my baby and crawl in a hole and hide from the whole world, my husband, my family, just me and her,
Yeah.
and nobody else.
Yeah. I have been there. I understand that feeling very well. Um, but I'm so happy that, you did climb out of that hole and that you were able to, process through the things. Like you said, you developed really good coping skills, and then therapy is always a wonderful tool to help work through those things. So, good for you for, getting the help that you needed, and you may have taken some time, but you did it. And that in itself is amazing.
Thank you.
Um, I know this question was not in the things that I had sent over to you, but I'm curious. How has
Okay.
your experience with your daughter's birth affected your experience in your postpartum with your son's birth?
I was much more prepared for anything and everything that could happen. I was literally researching outcomes, things that are like one in a million to happen, because I was like, I need to know what could possibly happen. And because with him, I started having contractions at 21 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and my delivering hospital was over an hour away from where we lived. Yeah, rural Nebraska. And so I was having to go get, the steroid shots and being monitored very closely. And so it really, Adeline's birth prepared me for the worst for Maverick's birth, and in the best way possible, to where I was able to advocate for what I wanted. I mean, my husband got to deliver him. We had delayed
Oh,
clamping. He
love
was on
that.
my chest for about 3 hours. He never left my room. He didn't get a bath. I mean, I was able to get everything I wanted.
That's
And granted,
amazing.
his birth was not only easy, but it was amazing. It was like, no, I don't want to say it was redemption for Adeline's, but it was in a way, because I was so scared, and I was just so thankful and so grateful to finally get the experience that I so longed for with her. Um, yeah, and with Mav, my epidural didn't work, which was great. um, but 3 pushes and he was out.
Good.
It was quick. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. He did have jaundice, so we had to stay in the hospital. But like I said, one of the things I learned was to advocate for myself and to look things up and do my research and ask questions. And I will say this: I used to blindly follow physicians because they have the degree, right? So I don't ask questions. Well, I have learned that it's okay to ask questions, and questions should be encouraged, because you have every right to know. I'm not questioning their knowledge or their skills. What I'm questioning is, why do you think this is the best option for me? And what are my other options? Because I do deserve to have that information. And
Yeah.
so with my son, he was born so quickly, he was very bruised. So he had jaundice. And we were in the hospital for a couple of days with a blanket light. And I got to a point where I was like, can't you prescribe me one of these to go home?
Mhm. They
And they
can.
were like, well, yeah, we can. I said, well, let's do that then. I don't need to spend another 48 hours here. And
Mhm.
then I'll take him to his pediatrician and we'll recheck him. If I have to take him every day, I will. But there's absolutely no need for us to still be in this hospital. There's no need. And it was learning how to ask those questions and figure out that information and ask for those resources that did help me. And also, come to find out, Adeline was tongue and lip tied, which
Mhm.
played a part in getting her to nurse. And so I knew this time around to look out for it with Maverick. He was tongue and lip tied. We got the tongue tie clipped in the hospital, and that boy has been a booby baby ever since. Can't get him off the boob.
Good.
And
I'm a huge
so, but
advocate for education on ties. Like that is, I'm very passionate about
yes,
that because I had
it
a lip tie and tongue tie baby, so I know the struggle.
it affects so much more
Mhm.
than just the latch. And I never realized it until Adeline was 6 weeks old and we found out that she was tied. Why was that not checked by the lactation consultant when we were in the NICU and she wouldn't latch?
Unfortunately, a lot of even your LCs don't always have the education on oral restrictions. So there's, I have another podcast planned in the future on oral restrictions.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
And then I found out they were hereditary. My husband had
Mhm.
one, his sister had one, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, well this is really good information." And that's why I love what you're doing because we're getting that word out because, medical professionals, LCs, nurses, they are human and they don't know everything. They can't know everything, and it's so important for other moms to share this information.
Yes, ma'am. I love I love what you said there because while nurses and doctors and all of your medical professionals, they go to school, right? But then recommendations and research is constantly changing. And so if they
There's no
don't go
continued
and get the
education.
CEUs on that particular subject, then
Mhm.
their information may be out of date and it may be different than what the new recommendations are, and they don't always stay up to date on those things. And while they usually have, you know, good intentions and they're well meaning, sometimes the proper information, like, it doesn't flow the way it should.
Mhm.
And also,
Absolutely.
what I have found a lot, is that sometimes medical professionals don't always realize that their knowledge isn't common knowledge. And so, especially in like an intense moment, whenever you're in the hospital delivering your baby and things don't go, the way as smoothly as everyone would like for them to go, in their minds, they don't realize mom doesn't know what's happening. And it's
Yeah,
that education piece that takes things from just being different to being trauma a lot of the times. And
I could
so,
not agree more.
yeah, that's one of my one of the things I really want to focus on in this particular podcast series is you know reminding providers and moms both that it's not lack of caring, it's just lack of communication a lot of the times.
Mhm. Most
Now,
definitely.
there's always bad moments, but
Of course.
most professionals don't get in the profession to they get into the profession because they love it, right? And
Absolutely.
so, anyways, that's just something that I like to always bring
Mhm.
up when I have the opportunity because I feel like it's a valid, important piece of it. But I have one more question that I wanted to ask before I let you go. I know you've got little ones, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But looking back, was there anything other than changing what happened? We can't change the things that actually happened. But is there any kind of information or conversation or knowledge, anything that you think might have helped, not in changing what happened, but in your processing of what happened, to view it, not that it there's any situation where that wouldn't have been traumatic, but to just have
Mhm.
been able to work through it more quickly, more easily, and to just kind of roll with it a little more um, comfortably, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if I would have been at any point properly informed on what really happened, if they didn't wait weeks to tell me what happened and then been like, "Oh, oops, sorry." Like, because how could I process what happened when I didn't even really understand what happened? And I should have been told when I was in labor, you have a fever. There's a possibility that she can contract the infection when she passes through the birth canal. So we are going to take her to the NICU as a precaution. We believe that this is the best option. And then at that point, I could have processed it because I wouldn't have argued with that. Of course, I want to take every precaution with my child. The other thing that would have helped is better screening for postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety.
Yes.
That little questionnaire that they have you fill out is a joke. Are you sleeping? I have a newborn. Of course I'm not sleeping. Come on. And then where's the follow up? My OB stopped seeing me after my 6 weeks because she just specialized in birth. I didn't I didn't have a regular PCP at that point. So where was the follow up for me, for the mental health help for me? I think that pediatricians should be aware of these things as well. They should be asking questions to parents. How are you holding up? I understand that they're the baby's doctor, but healthy mom, healthy baby. Okay.
Very
Those
true.
two go very much hand in hand.
Mhm.
And I think for me, if I would have done more research on after birth, the not only just in dealing with the trauma that I dealt with, but just the change in your emotions and the change in your body and the way you think and the way that your heart feels about the world after you have a baby. Nobody told me about that. No book told, I read all the books. Not one book told me about that. And so that's something that I share with new moms all the time is I'm like, read the books, but here's what's going to happen after. And
Mhm.
your feelings may be different than mine, but just a heads up, you're going to change. You're going to completely change as a person.
Mhm.
And there's not enough talk about what you go through afterwards, physically, emotionally, mentally. There's just not enough of that education out there. And the few things that are out there, they're not as easily accessed as what to expect when you're expecting, you know?
Yeah. I completely
Like what I
understand, and that's why we created the Sitting Moon to hopefully help, you know, include that piece out there. But yes, you are 100% correct. There's no follow up. There is very little, access to the education and just the preparation that you need. It's not there. So yes, all of those things are very, very valid. Um, that is all I have for you, and I am so incredibly grateful that you came on and shared your story. And what a powerful thing it is to be able to share your story and help, hopefully shape the way a future mom is going to be able to handle her situations and guide her through those things. I'm very passionate about it. Obviously, that's why I'm here. And I can hear the passion in your story as you're talking about it too. So thank you so much for hopping on here and agreeing to do this. Do you have anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap this up?
the only thing that I wanted to add is something that I've told a few of my friends when they found out they were pregnant is there are due date groups on Facebook that
Hmm.
you can join. And while no mom is going to give 100% medical advice, my reason behind saying this is listening and seeing other people's situations and hearing their stories because you have first time moms, you have 7-time moms, you have teenage moms, and you have moms that are in their 30s and 40s. And just getting to hear everybody else's stories or questions or what they're going through can bring you so much of a peace of mind, or it can help you go to your doctor and say, hey, I have this thing going on, and this might be something that it could be. It just it just is a safe place that can help. And that's just something that I found really helped me in my pregnancy.
Yes, I love that. That is very. Those are mom groups are wonderful. I love mom groups. I always am. Every time I do a one-on-one call with a mom, I'm like, hey, you should really look up some different mom groups in your area
Yeah.
on Facebook or Instagram or wherever.
Hmm.
That is amazing. Thank you for that. Um, Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was so good to talk to you.
Our mission at the Sitting Moon is to raise awareness, remove stigmas, and reduce barriers, thereby contributing to a healthier mother, family, and society. Please, if you're having any problems, we encourage you to speak up, get help. Remember, you are not alone.